Transfers, as I mentioned earlier, can represent a couple of different things. Transfers can actually be, oops, I made a mistake and I need to put this in another spot, this lease in another spot, or it can mean I'm physically transferring someone's lease into a new unit because they want a smaller or larger apartment or something along those lines. In my scenario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on the lease again and hit edit this lease, which takes me again into the lease notebook where all of the details are shared. Now, here's where I get an opportunity to start using my move button. The great news about the move button is it doesn't just do one thing, it's multifaceted. In this case, we're not yet ready to move this tenant out. We are going to transfer the tenant to another unit in this scenario. And then this last option, this move lease to another unit, this is the case that you would use in the event that you look up and realize, oh shoot, I just created a new lease and I stuck it in the wrong spot. You would simply use this button, click OK, and it's as if it never happened in the wrong spot. It picks up all its pieces and bits and moves them to the new lease. Now, what we'll do here is we'll go to transfer this tenant to a new unit. And our tenant has decided that they want to move into a smaller apartment. Now, in the event that you are using owners, and owners are something that you are, where technically you don't own your own inventory. You manage for someone else or a group of someone else's. In that event, if you are going to transfer someone from one unit to another, it is important that you transfer only when the owner is the same. Otherwise, you'll run into scenarios that are very difficult. The same would be true if you don't use owners, but you have multiple, say, apartment buildings that you own. If you're moving someone out of one apartment building and they have a completely different accounting file or set of books or checking account, it would be wise to flat out move them out and then start up a brand new lease elsewhere. This is a scenario that you would use only when you're transferring one property to another that is owned by the same individual or entity, or if you're in an apartment building and it's large and they want to just move down the hall type of thing. So let's go ahead and transfer this particular group. We're going to be transferring this lease to Oakview number 6. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say the date that they're scheduled to move. Now, you're not going to be able to move them in advance and execute it. You can set it up in advance and fill out this particular field, but you'll actually want to conduct the move on a date that's past or current. So we'll say that this particular individual wants to move on 7, what's today's date, the 19th. We'll say they wanted to move on the 15th. So I'm going to go ahead and type my date in, and I'm going to say the date that the new lease ends. In this scenario, they're going to rent from us for at least another year, so they end on the 31st of next year. And the reason, I can select my own reason, but in my case it is that they're moving to a larger or smaller apartment. And there are many choices for you, as you know. And then I'm going to select which property. Remember, PropertyBoss will give you a little hint if you're trying to select a property that's not owned by the same owner. In my case, these are owned by the same owner, so I'm in good shape. So I can determine if I'm ready to create an inspection for the existing location, a move-out type inspection. For our example, in this moment, I'm not going to create that, but in your example, possibly that's something you might want to do. I'm going to go ahead and hit execute, which brings up this second screen. The second screen is going to ask me a couple of very pertinent questions. Number one, I need to review the current lease and the new lease. So I'm looking to make sure that these are accurate numbers and I'm actually putting them in the right spot. I want to make sure that this transfer current balance to the new lease indeed is checked because we're going to be taking all the money and moving it on over. In my example, there are other scenarios, but in my example, this is the way I would handle it. Now, I'm not going to create an inspection for the tenant at the new location. You probably will, but for time's sake, I'm going to uncheck that button for now. I'm going to go ahead and say execute this move out now. or the move, excuse me. Now, this will tell me what happened, and it says everything was okay. So Rona Bossy has moved from Bongo Drive. At dummy unit, don't worry about that. That simply means that there's not actually a group of units, that the property and the unit are all one and the same. Whereas Oakview Apartments has many units. So Oakview Apartments is listed as unit 6, and that's exactly where I want them to go. And I marked for that balance to be transferred as well. So I can print this out. In my case, I won't for this moment, so I'll cancel out. We're back to our screen. This is our lease notebook once again. Now, before I go anywhere, I want to take a look at some things. I know this is a past lease. I'm going to peek at the register. Now, let's go to the register straight from here, and let's take a quick look at what PropertyBoss automated for me. Now, keep in mind that there are some setup restrictions. It's important that you're set up properly with PropertyBoss, allowing prorates, etc., in order for this to function properly. I'll take a look at that with you in just a moment, but let's suffice it to say that you're set up properly and you've conducted the transfer. Now, the next thing that happens is this was where we were. So we were sitting at a 7/1 rent due. Today's date is the 19th. So PropertyBoss brought the security deposit back into a usable format. We'll go over that when we do the move out, but the bottom line is there was a security deposit being held for $1,200. PropertyBoss credited the security deposit to this lease, meaning it's now usable money one way or another. And the reason it does that is because otherwise it'll sit up here on this particular register, and it would continue to be a liability for you, and you don't have the flexibility to tag it to the new apartment. We want that flexibility. So this is what PropertyBoss automated for us. And it puts some notes in it for you. It says this deposit has been returned for the transfer to unit, Oakview Apartment Unit number 6. Now, this does not mean returned and refund are two completely different things. This means it's been returned or credited out of liability, and then now it's back in this register as usable funds. We'll go over that again in just a little while. The transfer to new unit is where the money that was brought in was actually transferred over to Oakview Apartments number 6. Then PropertyBoss took a look at what was on the books, and it said, wait a minute. This rent is due for $1,200. I'm going to reverse that and do some prorating, because as of the 15th, that move out date, really only $560 was due. So I'm going to bring that $560 back in and change the amount of rent that's actually due. So you'll see this rent reversal took care of this rent due that was charged. They cancel one another out at net zero, and a new rent due was auto-figured by PropertyBoss to show you exactly what needs to be charged. So then some money was moved over. So we moved over our security deposit, and we moved over a tenant payment. So we moved over anything that was on the books, basically. That was all automated, every bit of this, with the exception of that tenant payment, which came in on the 25th. Sorry for my example, that tenant payment came in just a little bit too late. Ordinarily, it would have been received back in here. Now, that said, we will move now to the new apartment, leaving this one with a zero balance. And as you can recall, this one is actually considered a past lease. It's done. We're going to go to the new unit. And the new unit, remember, it's Oakview Apartments, and we went to unit number 6. Doesn't look like anything's there. Well, as the case with PropertyBoss, if you've left any windows open, those particular windows don't know what you've done behind the scenes. So remind them by clicking refresh and allowing everything to show in your view. Refresh solves a lot of problems if you're missing what you think should be there. So in my case, unit number 6, I now have a lease there. As of 8/1, we've set it up so that the rent will actually go up to about $50, but that won't show up in our books until our next post on 8/1. The most important thing to check is here on your register. You want to make sure a couple of things happened that money came over and that you were also able to charge anything that was necessary to charge moving forward from this point. So this actually is, as you'll recognize, security deposit is a charge. It's a type of charge that is reflecting money is due for a security deposit that's going to be held in escrow. This here, this rent due, shows the balance of rent that is due for the rest of the month. So this balance of rent due, this $400, is what's due for the rest of this month. Now, these two bits of money were transferred over. As you can see, we transferred over $1,200, which was the old security deposit. And our new security deposit, we've decided, is going to be this $750. So we have a little bit extra money sitting here. Additionally, when our rent was charged, our $400, which is for the balance of this month, and we transferred over some extra money, we have more money in payment than we have in charges. Now, you may say, well, that's not the case. You can always enter a new transaction. If there was a moving fee or a transfer fee or some specific fee that was in conjunction with this move, you can go ahead and create it, and you can apply the appropriate monies. There we go. And so now we have a cleaning fee, which sucked up a little bit more of the transfer money, and they still have a credit of $640. So come next month, they're an advantage. When rent is charged, they have part of the rent paid. Now, I also want to show you something. This transfer to new unit, this and this, both appear the same to PropertyBoss. And what I mean by that is it's money that's been received. Until you connect it to some sort of charge, it's just money. It doesn't know that this money goes with that security deposit necessarily, or that this money goes with that cleaning fee or rent due. You are always in control of that.